I had to get a new green machine card because my chip wasn't working yesterday. So they set me up pretty quick, and I noticed the expiry was 05/2030. And I said, really? I don't know if I'm going to be around by 2030, but I hope so. She said, oh, yeah, we'll be around. They don't usually give you that long a duration either. So anyway, I would like to introduce our panel. On my right is Jennifer Casa-Todd. And Jennifer is an educator, author, speaker, and media sparks facilitator with 30 years experience in public education. So please welcome Jennifer. To my left is Dr. Xing Xing, and he's an assistant teaching professor in the College of Engineering at Northeastern University, Toronto campus. His research interests broadly encompass AI and data management, focusing on data quality, machine learning, and deep learning. So welcome, Xing. And Avery Schwartz. Avery is a tech educator. She's the founder and CEO of Camp Tech, Canada's most established provider of practical tech and AI skills training for small businesses, and is co-lead of AI Skills Lab Canada, a national program bridging the AI gender adoption gap for women and non-binary entrepreneurs. So welcome, panel. I did a quick assessment, I guess we did it on our shared document about our interests, and actually it's quite interesting how we mirror the first panel. And for the demystify concept here today, I mean, some of the things that came up were, getting to audiences not inclined to understand tech, AI in the workplace, tips and resources for training, what kinds of skills should today's youth develop, and also conversations around AI with students, teachers, admins, pre-service teachers, etc. So I thought that was interesting. We share a lot in common, and it'll be interesting to see what subtleties we may come out with. So I wanted to start out with a question, since we're demystifying. How are you demystifying AI? And we'll start over here on my right. How are you demystifying AI?
Hi, everyone. So as an educator, as a classroom teacher, and now I'm working at Lakehead University with pre-service teachers, first and foremost, I help students to understand, and teachers rather, to understand what AI is. What is it? You know, it's not magic. It's a series of algorithms. It's machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. So first and foremost, we talk about what AI is. And then, as a teacher, I think we have to also look at the opportunities as well as some of the risks or some of the limitations of AI. So in my role, we have lessons on fact verification, right? When you get an AI hallucination, which is basically AI lies, and they do it in such a way that you believe them. So what does that look like in the classroom? What does that look like when you're looking at sources? What does it look like when you're doing research? And how can you verify facts? AI has bias, so helping students and teachers to identify what does that bias look like? What does it look like in English class? What does it look like in math class? What does it look like in science class, et cetera, et cetera? So, and there were some great examples brought up earlier in the panel about, if you put in, what does a scientist look like? What does AI show you? And what are the implications of this? So that's really, really important. Equity, we talk about, the fact that some AI platforms, if you pay extra, you get better results. We talk about equity. In some of our science classes, as a teacher librarian myself, co-teaching with science teachers, we talk about the ethics of AI around the environment. What does that look like? So a variety of different things that we do in classes, not across the board, because teachers are learning AI as well, right? But we know that AI is part of our world, so what does that look like? What does that look like in schools? What does that look like as a student? Academic integrity, that's a big one that we did in our library and in co-planning and co-teaching sessions. And those are really important conversations for kids. AI is not magic, and what are the implications of it? So that's what we're doing.
Very interesting. I think the conversational aspect as well, I think we like to reinforce. And you mentioned tech and science, and I think, Xing, you're kind of covering off that from a students that you reach standpoint, and you also have a contest that you may want to talk about.
Yes, actually, firstly, I would like to share the one project that our team is doing, actually, which is named Mirrors Restoration. using AI techniques. So we know that like ancient murals, they are very valuable like artifacts. They give us a lot of important information about like a historical, like a social, like cultural parts, like about the past civilizations. So we can find ancient murals like everywhere, right? Especially in Europe and Asia. So, however, like over the past like hundreds and thousands of years, most of like murals have suffered a very like a serious, like a very like how to say, it's like a severe like impact damage, actually in forms of like cracks or like peeling paint or even like missing like irregular like parts. So. Presently, the main like method to restore this kind of murals is by hand. I mean, it's not by my hand; it's by expert's hand, which is very like expensive and time-consuming. So what essentially we are trying to do is create like a platform that restore these murals and to reveal their like original appearance. Many like audience have a question about like why we do not use the existing like image restoration tools because image tools is very popular in like in AI, right? So I think the main reason is that actually we tried a lot of them, but none of them make the murals like a very nature. Yeah, because the damage about like murals is very how to say, it's a complex and it's in a mixed way. So what can I do? So actually we combine like two kinds of or like subcategories of the AI techniques. One is called CV, another one is NLP. So CV refers to computer vision. So you may have heard about like a self-driving car. There are cameras on the car, right? That continues to capture the images and the videos, and then in real time they will make a decision whether this object is a person, another object is a car, right? So similarly, we use this kind of CV technique. We are trying to, for example, if we want to like fill in a missing part, we are trying to collect the information that surround this like a missing part, and then we repel each step, like a small step, a small part each step, and then gradually fill in the whole missing part. Okay, so this is very like similar that to self-driving car. It's kind of the similar like techniques that we use. Another technique I want to mention is NLP. So it's a natural language processing. So you may not very familiar with this like terminology, but you definitely use ChatGPT, Gemini, all these things. Actually, they built upon the model which named the large language model. So the fundamentals of this large language model, the technique is NLP. So how we use that? Actually, we refer to some experts and ask them for the domain knowledge about like murals. So you can consider this like domain knowledge as a description. So I can give you an example. Like last month, we are trying to like restore murals about a Buddha. It's already like 800 years ago, and unfortunately, the right hand of that Buddha is missing. Yeah, because of it's very old, it's very ancient, right? And we don't know like what kind of gesture of this like right hand. So, but I asked the expert, and the expert like based on the hair and the face and the year of this Buddha, and then okay, the name of the Buddha is this. I cannot remember the exact name. Sorry. And yeah, and then based on like his left hand gesture, then he wrote a description about what his like right hand should look like. It's in this way, but not this way. Yeah, and then we integrate this like a description with like a CV techniques, and then we restore like its right hand. So it's very like interesting like project. So I want to say like all these like techniques looks very like fancy, but actually AI is not a magic actually. So you can consider a very like a simple example. I can give you, you just imagine that you have like a fruit series, apple, orange, apple, orange. So what's the next? You can predict this an apple, right? So it's kind of AI doing the same thing. They learn the patterns in the history, right? And then predict what's the next one. Yeah, so yeah, that's.
Yeah, nice and simple. You know, it's funny with the hand, of the Buddha, a lot of AI is creating images, right? And if you look closely, sometimes you can identify that it was generated by AI because, you know, the hand looks weird, like 3 fingers, or the arm is like in a really bizarre position. So I hope your Buddha doesn't end up that way, by the way. Over to Avery.
Hi, everyone. A lot of the work that I do is working with small and medium-sized businesses in Canada, which is the vast majority of businesses in Canada. So I'm fascinated about how AI shows up in the workplace, and particularly how it's adopted in the workplace. And one thing that I'm working on right now with a national project is Canada's first national program that's specifically for women and non-binary entrepreneurs and their AI adoption. There have been studies done around the world that show that there is a gender gap in AI adoption, that close to 25%, that's the gap that we're talking about in terms of people that do not self-identify as men. So we're talking about women, non-binary, and marginalized genders, tend to adopt AI 25% less. That's a big problem, because that is leaving people behind in an AI revolution. Also, it's a bit of a perfect storm of a problem, because women and marginalized genders are less represented in the people that create the AI, and they're also less represented in the data sets that are used to train AI. So it becomes a bit of a, like this thing that just goes around and around and around. If women and marginalized genders use AI less, then there is less information about them in the data set, so then they're less likely to use it, and it goes around and around and around. And also, here's another like kind of punch in the face. Women and marginalized genders traditionally hold more of the jobs that are being the most impacted by AI disruption right now. Women and marginalized genders tend to hold more clerical jobs, more entry-level jobs, more admin-style jobs, and those are the jobs that are being displaced by AI. So in my work, what I do with my company is we're not just training people, but we're also creating the space to make it okay for people to learn these skills. Because you can't just say to someone that is potentially being marginalized in society, oh, just go and take an online course. There are concerns that are had. There's also wanting to create a really safe space for people to learn and explore. Because the one thing that all the studies that show that women and marginalized genders adopt AI less, it's not a capability gap. I identify as a woman, and I don't have any less capability to adopt AI than someone that identifies as a man. It's often a confidence gap. And so that's what I'm doing a lot of work on right now, is building a space where it feels a little less risky, a little more warm and inclusive, and also where we talk about the real concerns. There are serious concerns about using generative AI. There's displacement to the workforce. There's an environmental impact. There is eroding your critical thinking skills. There's hallucinations. There's data privacy. There's algorithmic bias. I can just go on and on and on. And we create spaces where we can not just brush that stuff under the rug. I don't think you can realistically adopt AI in the long term without addressing those issues.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned bias because it's so prevalent. And even I was in the open data area in the city of Toronto for a while, and you know, a lot of people even in the city that were collecting the data felt the data wasn't biased. And as we started talking to them about these things, they go, oh, really, really, really? So it's a huge issue, definitely, when it comes to, as you said, algorithms, absolutely. And part of demystifying, certainly, I think, is to bring that out so people can understand. And also, as I think the work you're doing is to help stop it in a sense of when you're creating it, right? Like think about it and do the best to include everybody, which isn't easy, for sure, for sure, for sure. Well, speaking of, I mean, how do we effectively integrate the tools now in our day-to-day work, or even in fact for audiences out here? What suggestions might you have? And we'll come back over to this side to you know, deal with these tools and make it work for people as opposed to the opposite way.
So I just want to, I'm also here as a facilitator for Media Smart. So before I even think of tools, I think of some of the fundamental skills that I want our students to know, understand, and be able to do when it comes to using AI. It really touches upon what we have said already. So media is a construct of reality. We know that bias, stereotypes, all of those issues are in play. So as a teacher, I could just say, okay, kids are using AI to cheat, therefore we're not going to touch AI, we're going to go back to paper and pen. And that's a concern for me. So tools, when I'm as a teacher, there are some tools that I know I look at that have privacy at the forefront, and so I might look at those. At my board where I worked, we had Google for Education, for example, so Gemini, and it has tried to make strides to protect our student privacy. But there are lots of considerations when it comes to privacy. So regardless of the tool that I use, I think my question is, as a teacher, how can I use AI in a way that I can be fully human with my students, right? So I use tools that will help any students in my class whose first language isn't English, because AI is very good at helping me with that, with translation. AI is also very good with helping me for students who maybe are reading at different levels. I can now differentiate instruction for my kids. In my class, I have a class of 30 students. 17 of them might have a learning exceptionality whereby they need different things. In my 30-year career, it's never been so easy to be able to kind of personalize learning like that for my students. But again, when you think of your brain, so I work in a high school, adolescent development, our brain is a muscle. And if you're not using that muscle because AI is doing the homework for you, or AI is writing the essay for you, that's not great. I'm in the business of teaching. So also the tools that I use and sort of the advice that we give to students and teachers is how are we using AI in such a way that it actually helps you to learn? It doesn't stop you from learning. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, I think it sounds great. I can imagine how your students are responding to that. And I think, it's funny because on my email signature, I put in a thing, this mail wasn't written at all by AI, entirely human. So I think at some point we have to establish, what's what and who's who. We'll go to Avery next on this question, your tools. Or are you?
Okay, I'm going to say something really wild. And this actually riffs right on what you just said about disclosure. I actually kind of don't care what tools you use, because I'm going to say something pretty incendiary here. ChatGPT can help you write an email, and it can also help you make a bomb. Okay? It doesn't matter what the tool you choose is. Pick whatever flavor you like. ChatGPT, Grok. Before somebody said Grok like it was a 4-letter word. Grok, use Gemini, use Copilot, use Perplexity, use Claude. It's like Pokemon, okay? Collect them all. I don't care. My bigger concern is how you use the tool. And one thing that I'm really, really hung up on these days is transparency. Throw your hand up in the air if you have used a generative AI tool in the last week. Keep your hand in the air if you told people you used it. Okay. That's what I'm really interested in these days. How are we disclosing our AI use? Because it's not just the tool, it's how you use it. And you need to tell people how you use it, because really at the end of the day, what this gets down to is it's trust, right? We don't trust AI. I don't trust AI, and I use it every day. We have to lean so hard on human interaction, and a lot of human interaction is built on trust. Transparency is a pillar of trust. One of the biggest threats to AI, one of the biggest threats that AI poses is when trust is, when trust falls apart, right? That's when in companies you have reputational risk. It's when you have damage, when something goes wrong, when a company really gets in trouble. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they used AI for that. It's because they're not being transparent. They're not disclosing their use. I really, really think long and hard about the intent behind AI use, the impact of your AI use, and sometimes that's positive impact. This isn't all doom and gloom, friends. Like, AI can, in the words of Daft Punk, make you better, faster, stronger, okay? But AI can also potentially have an environmental impact. We can have hallucination issues. We can have algorithmic bias issues. So how do you mitigate those risks and that impact? And then also, how are you transparent and how are you accountable for what your AI does? And that's what interests. So I'm being a bit controversial here, Keith, because it's like,
so. No?
I care about the tools, but I care more about how the tools are being used.
Yeah, I would disagree with you being controversial. I think that's an important part, and I'm glad you mentioned it. And sometimes I think people will trust AI simply because of its technology aspect. A quick anecdote, back in the early days of a computer program called Writer, my boss purchased that for me. I was editing public health nurses for a local newspaper column, and they wouldn't buy into my editing until I got that tool. Because, well, Writer has scored your literacy level up here, and something. They went, oh, okay, if the computer says so. So, I mean, there's still, I think, legacy of that, and I think, you know, everything you said is really important in terms of just that trust, and transparency can help, I think. Zheng, I wanted you to mention too your contest that you have coming up, the global contest in relation to the tools, because I asked you the question of are they going to be able to use ChatGPT, et cetera, to help them code, and your first response was no. So talk a bit about that, read the tools and the contest.
Okay.
You're pretty adamant about it.
Yeah. Thank you. So, firstly, I would like to have like a comment, which is like because as a professor, like I always talk to my students. It's not just like to learn how to use the AI tool, but you should also learn when not to use them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the comment. So as like what I just want to like introduce like some our organization, which is named like Canada AI Olympiad, and this year I'm honored to be the executive director. So you can like search like Canada AI Olympiad on Instagram and follow us. Actually, this like organization co-founded by 26 professors in different universities in Canada. They're from like U of T, like UBC, McGill, McMaster, and Waterloo. And we are trying to select the talent like students to represent Canada to compete the AI in global stage next year in Slovenia actually. So we come up with this kind of organization and got authority from International AI Olympia, which is supported by UNESCO. And we will like design 2-stage competition, and the first stage will be held like on November 23rd. And then in the next stage, we will select 4 students to compete in next year. So this organization is not just like for high school student, but also for middle school student actually. So every student, if you are interested in AI, you can like come and attend. And actually, our like mission is trying to somehow empowering like the future AI leaders in Canada. Yeah.
The Olympia, I think, is an interesting name for it. So it's Go Canada Go and elbows up, right? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. To answer your question, actually about like that tools, actually, unfortunately, the international competition forbidden this kind of tools in the first stage. So, we cannot use that. So it's really somehow want to know the fundamental like skills about students like mathematics, like coding. Yeah, because they're also like important to learn AI. Yeah.
Can I just add something? Connected to what both of you said, and that is the idea of being transparent, being intentional. So in my classes, both with the pre-service teachers at Lakehead and my students, we always talk about when and how is it okay for you to use AI in this assignment. Because what we know, and Media Smarts has lots of research around this, fact checkers or detectors for AI are not accurate. And in fact, where they really go wrong is some of our new English language learners who sometimes write in a way that gets flagged by AI, but it's not AI, which is a huge concern. So in our class, so I would say we need to be curious and critical. So how are you using this? I've been surprised sometimes. I'll ask a student, how are you using this? Are you using it to help you learn, or are you using it to stop your learning? And sometimes they're like, no, you're right. And other times they'll say, actually, I put it in here to find out what the strengths and weaknesses of my paper are so that I can make it better. And I think that's really important too, above and beyond whatever tool that you're using, that you stay curious and critical, and that if you're a parent at home, maybe you're not an educator, you're a parent at home, you say, what did your teacher say about using AI for this assignment? Like having those conversations.
Jumping on that just really quick about a tool in particular. In the last panel talked so much about how the tools themselves evolve and the tools change,
yes,
and there's new features added. So anybody in the room that is using ChatGPT or Google Gemini with kids, or actually even with yourself if you're trying to learn something, ChatGPT now has something called study mode, and Google Gemini has something called guided learning. Mm-hmm. They both do the exact same thing. When you turn it on, and you just go to your little, the plus sign and turn on guided learning in Gemini or study mode in ChatGPT, and then you say, 3x plus 6 equals, it will not give you, 3x equals 6, excuse me. It will not immediately solve it for you. Instead, it will coach you through how to solve it. It will not give you the answer. So that's a great way to just be like, oh, you're using ChatGPT on your math work, but what way are you using ChatGPT on your math work?
I think what's interesting too is about teachers and just citizens. We do have some agency here, and these tools are starting to do that because of the blowback that they're hearing. And if they want to stay economically viable, especially to get into boards of education and so on, they're going to have to cooperate a little bit. It does talk to trends a bit, which I want to do as our next question. All of a sudden this came about, and now you've got a whole bunch of them, and it's like the hot thing now. And I think educators have problems with sometimes that, because the trend is there, everybody wants it, and there hasn't been enough time to really think about what it means. People are using it, and then there's all these issues that you're talking about. So let me ask you, what do you think is trending right now? I know audiences often have trouble following all of this because there's so much of it. And I think what we're trying to do is stay on top of it so that when we talk to you in presentations or classrooms, we're able to articulate some of the things that you might need to think about. So what are you seeing now or on the horizon that either worries you or excites you? And we'll need to be kind of quick on this because we're going to get some time for questions.
So this is just the educator lens. What I'm seeing is that there are companies that are creating everything that you would ever need to be a teacher. There are some programs called Magic School and School AI that are being, marketed to school boards in order to help students to use AI in unique and interesting ways, and also to teach about what AI is and what it does. Copilot, which is Microsoft, there are some school boards of education that are using Microsoft, and so Copilot has really done some thinking about privacy issues and what does this look like in education, and has made lots of tools available to teachers. And Google, as a Google innovator as well, I have had the experience with Google Gemini and how Google Gemini is sort of being marketed towards educators. And these trends excite me because I can be that human being that better serves the kids in my class by letting AI do some stuff, but I am always at the same time curious and critical, because like a tool, for example, will give feedback. Well, that's my role as a teacher. I need to give feedback to my students because I need to know what their work is like, and I need to get to know them as learners and know that they are meeting my curriculum expectations. So I think as teachers, we have to be a little cautious about embracing all the tools all the time, regardless of what's trendy. Just because a shiny new tool does this, it doesn't mean that I should choose to use it. And that's really the discernment that when I'm speaking to educators in whatever my role is, that I use. And certainly pre-service teachers at the faculty as well.
I think a good point. Let's take a look at it before we just massively adopt it. Zhang, what's trending for you?
Yeah, so I would like to talk about this topic in a little bit like a high-level idea. So I think the one big trend would be the rapid development of generative AI. Because as what you see, why generative AI becomes so popular? Because it lowered the barriers to produce very high quality content, right? So I believe this trend will goes on, and I mean the quality of the generated like content will be higher, and also the speed will be faster, right? And another trend I would like to say, the big difference between AI and the humans is that all humans have emotions. We know like we feel sad, we feel happy and angry, but AI does not. But I believe,
Not yet.
yeah, not yet. But I believe, like one day in the next, like maybe 10 years, I think we can somehow mimic this kind of emotions for AI. Yeah. And also another trend I would like to say, AI is moving to different industry. Nowadays, you can see for financial areas, like they use like AI to detect fraud, right? And for like healthcare, like some doctors use like AI to help with like surgeries and also automatically generate like X-ray reports, all these kind of things. And I believe one day we can use like these kind of AI applications to solve everyday problem, but not just this kind of specialized areas. Yeah, thank you.
Avery.
The relationship between technology and education is multifaceted, and in many ways is very fraught. So in public education, in North America especially, something really interesting happened in the last 15 years. Around 2008, 2009 or so, it became really, really popular in schools to learn to code. And that big change of like, holy guacamole, everybody has to learn how to code, oh my gosh, there has to, like, that didn't just come completely out of nowhere. A lot of it actually came from the private sector. It came from the technology industry themselves. Some lot of money was put behind some really cool, great organizations. In America, a lot of it was led by a cool organization known as code.org. And then we had some really great organizations here in Canada, including my friends over at Canada Learning Code. We didn't have that in learn to be a public health inspector, or learn to be a rock star biologist, or learn to be an amazing conductor of a symphony orchestra. There is a disjointed relationship between the private sector in technology and its impact on the education sector. Now, we also don't live in a vacuum. We live in a world that like kind of idolizes technology. But something that's really interesting and that happened as a bit of a blowback of that really big everybody needs to learn to code promise of 15 years ago is that now, in 2025, 2026, the bottom fell out of it. Some of the highest unemployment rates right now are coming out of kids that learned computer science. Kids that were sold a promise that if you learn to code, you will get a six-figure job right when you come out of school. And that is not true anymore. Coding schools are closing left, right, and center. Schools themselves are struggling to attract people to computer science careers because the myth, the dream that parents as well were sold, that if your kid learns to code, who cares whether they actually like it or not, if they learn to code, they will then immediately graduate into a six-figure job. And that's not true anymore. So I think we need to look at and still be pragmatic and realistic about how important it is to actually emphasize technology skills versus all the other skills. And I say this as a super nerd. My friends, like, I love technology. I teach technology. I live and breathe technology. But the number one skill that I think everybody, regardless how old you are, the number one skill I want you to learn today is how you like to learn. The emphasis is on the word how. How do you like to learn? I know I like to learn in a, I won't spell this out because it's got a swear word in it, but I like what the kids say, FAFO, which is F around and find out. That's one of my favorite ways to learn. I like to just mess around and play with tools and see what's possible and build something that's interesting to me. I know that's how I make mistakes and that's how I learn from my mistakes. But however you like to learn, that's probably the best thing you can figure out right now because you will absolutely never stop learning.
Awesome. If you've heard of the name Jeffrey Hinton, You'll know who I'm talking about. He's a Canadian-British person. Anyway, he's famous for being the king and some say the godfather of machine learning. Anyway, he says the best job to get now is a plumber.